YouTube, anyone can see it.
Where?
It's coming.
Oh, I was like, where? I don't see it.
But we're live on
it's
Instagram.
YouTube link you sent, right?
Yes. Okay.
It's not coming up for me.
YouTube? It's live now.
Can you show the address? Because I've done it a couple times.
The most recent one.
And then I can send it to.
You can chat here, right?
Yes, you can chat here. Yeah. So this is a YouTube link. Sarah, go to chats and then.
Yeah. Oh, I'm pressing it like it's my phone. Because okay, I'll just copy it and give it downstairs. Go ahead.
Okay.
So is YouTube live? Can we verify that?
Mm-hmm. I'm watching it now.
You can see it now?
I can see it now.
Oh,
all right,
perfect.
So go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So today is April 9th, right? And this is our first virtual program. So bear with us as we are figuring out technical glitches. And for me, who only can handle text messages and as far as email is concerned, I'm learning new ways how to go out and communicate with our audience. But we're really excited and thrilled to be on that platform with all of you, which I felt like because a lot of our audience is overseas as well. And when we told that we will be doing virtual programming, they were very excited that, oh, we can join you, we can come. So in that context, it's a wonderful idea, but I do miss you all. March 6th, we had our opening with Sarah Khan. It was about our new show, her actually first solo in Philadelphia. And it was Undisciplined Pleasures, Vigilant Defiance. The show was curated by Anna Casson. Anna and I, myself and Sarah, we have been talking about this show for over a year now. And then finally it was happening. We had a wonderful opening on March 6th, first Friday. And after that, time changed pretty quickly. Like it's for all of us. We knew it was coming, but it will come and that fast, I think we did not have an idea. So it took us as a 12 Gates team to navigate things, to understand. And we know art plays an important role in this environment where we're quarantined at home, where we're trying to speak to our families overseas, within USA, within even one city. We're not meeting our friends. So I realized, okay, I think virtual reality is the new reality. So I talked to actually Anna and Sarah that I really want to start 12 Gates programming again. And we had a discussion how we do that. So we were supposed to have a talk on April 16th. It was scheduled. So we discussed, okay, now we don't have calendar issues. We don't have space issues. So how about we talk about our exhibition, about our work now. So then we talked about this topic today, which is defiance and pleasure in times, in unstable times. So in conversation with Sarah K. Khan and Anna Arabindan Kassan. Anna and Sarah, before I give Zoom to you, let me tell you that exhibition, that collaboration was and still going to be, it's still going an amazing collaboration and get to know you more. And the beautiful pieces in the gallery, like I go to gallery here and there just to check on and just, to embrace the space, like just I want to be in that space and I'm alone. And I just want to let you know, Sarah, your work every time I go there, it's even, it looks better and looks more hope to me. So by saying that, I will give floor to Anna and Sarah. But one thing to our Instagram friends, our Facebook friends, and our YouTube friends, I just want to let you know, if you have any questions, please send them our way through quick emails, quick Instagram. I am checking emails as they speak, and then we can answer any questions you have. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Aisha. It's amazing to be able to do this. I'm sad we can't do it in person, but it's a really wonderful privilege and pleasure to work with women like you. And as an art historian, it's always wonderful to be able to be in conversation with artists. And Sada, sorry, I'm jumping in here, but I just wanted to say this. You know, my work moves between historical visual culture and contemporary art. I work on race and colonialism and Black diaspora. But really, it's artists like you whose work inspires me to do more and to look at me. And so this is just me fangirling before we get into the conversation. So I thought maybe, Sarah, since you had that PowerPoint you showed us earlier, for people who haven't had the opportunity to go to Philly yet and to go to 12 Gates, perhaps it might be helpful for them to get a bit of an overview of the work.
Okay.
Before we jump in.
Okay, what I want to do though is I want to fangirl also. You're not the only one who gets to fangirl. Let me find you guys. I have to share the screen. But before I share the screen, I also need to just first say thank you for, you know, the chance to work with you guys, you know, it goes back to Deb Willis and Women in Migration, and then meeting Anna in Florence, and then having a lovely conversation, and then following up. And then 12 Gates, I've always admired you from afar and followed the wonderful contemporary artists that you've had. And so then the opportunity to actually work with all of you together was something I couldn't miss. So, so that said, I think what I'll do is I will share, hold on. I'll pull up the first image. Is that a good idea? In the series of the first of the 10 prints?
Yeah, I think you've unshared your screen. There we go. Yeah, pull up the first image.
Okay. Here we go. So yeah, there we go. That's the first image, the first of the 10. And why don't you lead and guide me, Anna, because you're so good at what you do as a wonderful art historian that actually speaks more eloquently about the artist's works than the artists do themselves. That's what I love about skilled art historians, is they have this wonderful context. So let's begin that conversation.
Well, I'm going to read actually from something that you wrote about this set of 10 prints, which are your own personal, but also sort of archival response to a 16th century Central Indian cookbook called the Book of Delights, which was commissioned by Sultan Ghias Shah. And what you're doing here is reimagining the Sultan's harem and sort of focusing on women who have been cooped up in the city of joy. And I'm paraphrasing here from some of the notes and the work you've done. And this print you call In the Wake of the Indian Ocean World Before European Colonization. And we're seeing the kind of the microcosmic world of the Indian Ocean and Indian Ocean slavery as the sort of starting point for this series. So maybe what would be helpful is for you to tell us how you found the Book of Delights first, you know, and as an inspiration for your artwork, and then how you see this print, because it's very different to the rest of the prints. It's a map. It doesn't have the same colors, it doesn't have the same imagery in a lot of ways. So just lead us through some of that
Pleasure.
research.
So pretty much all of my work derives from rage or anger about certain things that are happening in the world. And I wanted to, I have a background in food studies, food history. Before the discipline existed, I basically created a career and degrees that are the equivalent of a PhD in food studies, public health, nutrition, and then plant sciences. And so fast forward, all of those things are now a part of the work that I make and the work that I think about. And I came across the Nyamatnama, also translated as the Book of Delights. I came across it often in various books or reviews or historical references around cookbooks from, you know, the beginning of when they were made up to the present, and looking at the medieval world or the South Asian historical world. And this Book of Delights always came up, and it's a list of recipes. And about 2.5 years ago, through the British Library, I got hold of a translation. It's in Persian originally. And I got hold of a translation in black and white photographs of the miniature paintings that are made during the Sultanate period. So it's the pre-Mughal period. And I got a hold of them, and I noticed that they were different ranges of colors in the black and white. Through the British Library, I got hold of high definition, high resolution color photographs of the prints. And I realized that this was, although they were all Persianized, because if you were a sultan of any muster or of relevance, then you had an atelier. And in that atelier, you had often Persian and or Persian trained miniature painters. And so they're all Persianized, but there was a range of ethnicities represented in terms of color. They were all Persianized because if you see Christ in China, he looks Chinese. If you see, if you go to South India, he looks South Indian. So they were all Persianized, but I wanted to, so I started doing the research. I started doing the historical research, what was happening in the Indian Ocean world before colonization in this time period, from about the 1200s to the 1450s, 1550s. And I just wanted to know, what did the world look like before there was a huge European presence, from the Portuguese to the Dutch to the British, in the Indian Ocean world. And now I'll go to the actual image that's in front of you. I also wanted to reference and explore parts of the world that I probably had more in common with than North America, for example, or Europe. If you look at East African cuisine and Ethiopian cuisine, for example, and you look at the coast of West India, those cuisines have a lot of overlap. There's been mixing for millennia. And why wouldn't I explore that? Why wouldn't I look at the Indian Ocean world? And also very much inspired by the work of Amitav Ghosh in An Antique Land, up to his last two pieces of work. So I wanted to just look at it before. And now I'll just quickly go to some of the images. The clouds that you see in the top that frame it and on the side, those are pulled from the Book of Delights. But the Indian Ocean world was explored. Africans were skilled sailors. And if they were skilled sailors, then they were skilled navigators. And they traversed the Indian Ocean world in these dhows, these lateen sailed wooden sailboats. So those populate the ocean landscape. In the middle is a map of the world made by a map maker, an Arab Muslim map maker from 1154. And so, and the world is north is south and south is north, east is west and west is east. So again, reimagining different hegemonies, different patriarchies, different ways of ruling, different forms of enslavement. And then in the bottom left corner is an astrolabe. And that astrolabe was used by sailors. Ibn Majid, Awam, Amka actually told me about Ibn Majid. And so that was probably an astrolabe that was similar to the one that Vasco da Gama used to figure out the route from East Africa to the West Indian coast. So that's just one little way of how I got into it, and then some representation. But I might be talking a bit too much, but ask me more questions.
Wonderful. I love this print, and for many reasons, but one of them is that you know, when you study colonial representation, you know, beginning kind of in 1492, whatever that, you know, date can mean, there are so many representations of European explorers with similar kind of iconology that you've got here, the astrolabe, the map, the boat, but your print really turns that iconology completely upside down, literally in terms of the map, but also, you know, in terms of maritime history and uses of technology. You know, again, this way of disrupting but also materializing other histories, I think is so powerful. So let's move to the women, because that, I think that's where these prints become so important.
Yeah, so the series, the next, so that's the first 10 prints, and now the next prints are 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And 2 and 6 are they kind of bookend. And the 3 couples that you see here are represented in the Book of Delights. I had presented a paper at Black Portraitures called To Serve and to Service. And it was playing on this notion of servicing the Shah. And I wanted to just eliminate the Sultan as the center and reimagine what conversations these women and or women identified individuals might have been having as they were serving the Shah. Because historically, in different parts of South Asia, the Book of Delights is from a part of South Asia that is north of the Deccan in Mandu and Malwa region. But at this time period, when it was being made, when it, you know, it was commissioned in 1469, it was completed in 1505. So, you know, 44 years of making the Book of Delights. So what was happening historically, and I'm just wondering, you know, these are called undisciplined pleasures, and it's what were they talking about? Secretly, openly among each other when they heard, for example, in Bengal, while this was being made, historically, there were 7 years of Africans ruling Bengal, that region. And so what were they thinking when they heard that, you know, these 3 successive rulers had ruled for 7 years? And then when they were overrun and dispersed and came down to the Deccan and came down to the regions of Malwa, did they enter, and or the women that they were engaged with or involved with or came with them, did they enter the harem? Did they hear the gossip? What did they talk about? So these were the things I was imagining. So what are these invisible histories? How do we inscribe forgotten histories that don't exist, into the past so then they can be in there in the future? And then about the undisciplined pleasure, and Anna, we've had lovely conversations about this, there's 2 things about undisciplined pleasure, and one of them, reading Christina Sharp's In the Wake, and I actually should, the first print that we just saw, it was also in honor of Christina Sharp's work and her book In the Wake, about enslavement. She's been an inspiration, and then also Saidiya Hartman's critical fabulation ideas. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to reference that. And then I wanted to just kind of go back, and it's kind of ironic in this moment, in these hard times of a pandemic, where social media is it is the center of our lives. It is our way of engaging, because we are literally distanced from each other. Like, you can't smell my perfume. You can't smell the food that's cooking downstairs. So I wanted us to just elevate what it means to flirt, to have a conversation to feed each other, to listen, to fan you if you're hot. And then I used around the frame all of the utensils and ovens that you find in the Book of Delight. So it's about alchemy. It's about creating hotness, heat, pleasure, taste. So that's another long answer to your very simple question.
Those are the best answers. Yes, I think I should have also mentioned Christina Sharp. Maybe we can come back to some of her work later on. But I just want to go back to the term you use, critical fabulations, which you're thinking about Saidiya Hartman's work, and then there's also, I think, a really wonderful and rich Black diaspora art tradition within the US, but also in the Caribbean and Britain. And I'm just thinking immediately of someone like Lubaina Hamid, who also thinks about her historical research and then artistic production in similar ways. Both Lubaina and Saidiya use language in a lot of their work. Some of the work Lubaina uses poetry and letters, and of course Saidiya is, as a writer, she's writing those untold stories, right, and kind of imagining. But you do something different here when you're sort of imagining these conversations, and so I just wondered if this would be a way for you to talk about process as an artist, and in printmaking in particular. Like how does color and ink and paper, allow you to animate the archive in this way?
Shall I go to another print too, just to change it up? These are some of the portraits. And then this is still Undisciplined Pleasure, and it's the first of the Shiros that you see. So as my father says, Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm very proud of that moniker. I wasn't at certain points in my life. But the process has been rich. I've been able to do this work because of Blue Mountain Center, because of the amazing Indigo Arts Alliance, where we got to see each other in Portland, Maine this fall, because you were at the Lunder Institute for your thing and I was in my residency. So that was wonderful. And then I studied letterpress printmaking with Amos Paul Kennedy Jr. I studied paper making in Madison. And then I also learned from Mary Hark. So about process, the paper that these first 10 series are on Vasli paper. And Vasli paper is paper that is 3 to 4 layers of handmade paper that's then adhered to each other. So it's very stiff, and then it's burnished. And in miniature painting, you want a very smooth, soft, hard surface, so you can literally paint with the single hair of the squirrel, your brush. Of course, I wasn't doing that. I worked with printmakers. I wasn't painting. And because of Indigo Arts Alliance and the Minters, I got to meet David Wolf and Sean Wolf, who are fine printmakers in Portland, Maine, very respected throughout the printmaking community. And we became fast friends and had a wonderful time, literally co-creating in many respects. A lot of the colors are vibrant colors that you find in the miniature paintings that from which these derive. So these pastels and sometimes almost fluorescent in their brightness, the chartreuse and stuff. So we use handmade paper. I sourced the handmade paper from a Muslim family that's been making handmade paper for 400 years. And one part of their paper making practice is this Vasli paper from Rajasthan. And so I would draw. Then I would draw on linoleum, and then I would cut them, and then we would proof them. And then these represent 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 layers of running through the press and then outlining some of the framing. And this is one that is a little not as detailed, for example, as the ones that you see later on. Does that help with the process?
It does. I have a question actually while we're on that topic. Somebody asked us question through Instagram. Was just going to ask, for those who haven't seen the show, could you describe the work's materiality?
The 10 large prints are on Vasli paper. I worked with linoleum cuts. We used oil ink that's used in printmaking, but we did infuse every single one of the prints is infused with essential oils that you find in the Book of Delights, and essential oils that are actually also associated with the individual. So this is Queen Bilqis. My mother's name is Bilqis, so it's also an order in honor of her because she's kind of badass. And so Bilqis was the cousin and or relative of the Queen of Sheba. So we have East Africa represented, we have Yemen or the Middle East or Arab world represented. And it is thought that frankincense and myrrh, for example, come from those parts of the world. So this particular edition is infused with frankincense. Each woman identified person has a pattern and color, 2 patterns associated with her, and a color and a smell. So even if you can't smell it, it's there, and that's what's important. So that's some of the stuff around the materiality. The smaller portraits that you saw just for a moment are on my handmade paper. So they're smaller, they're not Vasli, they're not stiff, they're not hard, they're not burnished. So they receive the ink in a different way, in a softer way. They drink it differently and it dries differently. But those papers are not only infused with the essential oils, but they have different spices that I ground up and infused in the papers. A long time ago, I had made these papers 10 to 15 years ago, the ones that are mine, and finally got a chance to put them to good use.
I think that that's one of the things I have long admired about your work, not just these prints, but others too. The emphasis you put on materiality, and that, to me, that's also a question of labor. And as you've described, this was very labor intensive. It was also collaborative, and I want to come back to that. But that labor, your labor, also in a way mirrors the fact that these women are laboring in different ways. And I know that that's something that is a theme throughout your broader work and filmmaking. But it's also something that's so important when you're telling a story of, or telling migrant histories, right? Particularly Asian and South Asian women's migrant histories. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that as well. How does something like this, which, you know, it's so, I mean, they're so ornate. They're just gorgeous. I can't stop looking at them. And sometimes I think we get a bit nervous about things that are too beautiful, as if that will somehow stop us from thinking about less beautiful things that might be associated with them. That's not a very eloquent way of putting it, but I think you know what I mean. That kind of there's always a distinction, or there seems to have been a distinction made in art history often between, you know, something being beautiful and something being more functional, or as if labor and materiality and beauty can't necessarily go together. But I think that's something that you really work to disrupt. So maybe you could talk more about that in this work, but also maybe in, you know, how you see it connected to other parts of your working process.
Yeah, other bodies of work. So I have a series that's ongoing that I have to start up again called Migrant Kitchens, and it's also a body of work that I'm working on around South Asian farmers, women farmers, and it's all connected in that domestic labor specifically is invisible it's not considered labor. It's not considered to be sophisticated, to be nuanced, to require great skills. So this is kind of a lateral way of elevating it and amplifying it, in a serious way, but also in a playful way. Anybody who knows me knows that that's a term I often use. So that's definitely a theme in pretty much a lot of my work of domestic labor as to elevate it, amplify it, embrace it. I'm sure, Anna, you've experienced, and Aisha too, and maybe some of the people listening, is that as women or as feminists, some of us thought that, well, we have to go into these male domains and we have to excel at those things that they excel. And that's perfectly fine. That's a wonderful choice. That's a valid choice. But I think the kitchen, why I have no desire to leave the kitchen. I love the kitchen. It's science, it's technology, it's sophistication, it's multitasking, it's multisensorial, it's having an awareness of so many things. And the Book of Delights is not just recipes for food, they're medicinals, they're aphrodisiacs, there's how do you hunt, how do you prepare the animal, how do you, so it's a whole world view of how you interact with it. So that's about kind of the invisibility of labor and women's labor and elevating it. And then I think you were also talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, about high art and low art, utilitarian art, which we tend to call craft, as opposed to beautiful art that is to be looked at and appreciated.
Right,
no
and I think,
go ahead.
No, I agree. That was where I was trying to get to too, because I think craft, we talk about process and labor, and whereas with high art, so-called, that conversation is not as easy to get to. So yeah.
The abstract concepts behind the work are more valued, I think, perhaps, than the labor that is involved. But I would say, as many, and I'm stealing from all of my friends and colleagues in the American Craft Council, from Haystack, from my husband, who's an art historian, from, you know, all the wonderful people I've had the pleasure to know who are in those worlds, is that they all require labor, process, skill, whether you get the MFA or not. And working with David Wolf and Sean Wolf, I mean, master printmakers and master, kind, normal, lovely people with deep knowledge from doing this from so many years, and then sharing it with me. So I personally don't adhere to those distinctions. It requires skill, it requires repetition, it requires a lifetime of doing it over and over again. And my skill is more in the kitchen, but I can certainly collaborate with wonderful people, and we can co-create these images too. But yeah, that high art, low art, trained as an artist, craft, utilitarian, I find those distinctions tiresome. I'm actually I'm not interested in justifying the work that way. And those conversations don't interest me as much as just what's the work in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's why you're, again, like it's hard to have those distinctions in conversation with your work, because it really collapses that. And I mean, I think one of the ways it collapses is also the way that you foreground collaboration. And I wanted to just talk because a little more about that, because I mean, a lot of scholars, feminists, have talked about collaboration too as a kind of feminist practice, and we're both in fields that are often antithetical to collaborative work and don't value collaboration, right? The kind of genius artist, the lone academic working away, right? None of which is healthy at all, or I think, or really, I think, helpful to what we do. But so yeah, I wanted to ask you more about how you see collaboration. You've talked a little bit about how it's kind of functioned in the work, but this is not, I mean, collaboration is not just something you've engaged in with this series. Like it's a really key part of what you do.
Yeah. With the Migrant Kitchens, that was a wonderful collaboration. I mean, you can't, you can be a filmmaker who does the filming, who does the editing, who does all that stuff, but I think it's really hard to do it well, or that's just not my strength, the film editing. So I worked with a lovely young woman named Amna Atiq, who helped me edit a lot of my films for that. And then also another colleague in Madison, Aaron Granite. And it's more important than that, it's the engagement with community. I mean, Queen's Migrant Kitchens was focusing on the art of hanging out and engaging and finding people in the community to work with who were working in these communities for decades, and then collaboratively saying, you know, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I want to do, and then them leading me to folks, and all along the way, every step of that process, doing to the best of my ability to make sure that there's proper reimbursement in terms of time and effort and access, and those things are communicated to the best of our ability. So yeah, definitely with that, and also with the Indian women farmers, the Fulbright that I had in India, the last one from 2014 to 2015, that's very much about collaboration. I work, Meeta Mastani introduced me to a bunch of people from previous PhD work there for many, many years. I had a nice network of people in the art world, in the environmental justice world, in the traditional healing world. So that gave access. I mean, I don't know how else to do it. It's interesting, a studio practice. I mean, a studio practice is more recent, like a dedicated studio practice. And I like it and I don't. Depends, you know, it's like anything, right? You do it for a while and then you need a break. I need a break from it. I need to go back to the community or collaboratively. And then it's what something I think we all know is choosing wisely who you collaborate with.
Yeah. That's also a skill and an art.
It cannot be fun. It can be insane. We've all had those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just so refreshing, and I find it nourishing, really, to just hear those things and see how they work out. And this series too is really about collaboration and connection, right? I mean, it's in every print. I mean, the portraits obviously are of single women, but in every print there is that kind of synergy and actually, sorry, Siri decided to join the conversation. How that happened. I think just quickly, you were talking about filmmaking, and I just suddenly wondered, did their work of filmmaking, scripting, creating narrative, sort of that serialized narration, was that part of your thinking when you were making these at all?
I keep thinking about like a short, graphic novels for these. I mean, I want to see them literally walk off the page and wink at you or play at you or walk away and or literally walk off to the east. I left the frame open, so the east was always open. I personally, I don't want to be caged in. I don't want to be caged in. I don't want to be closed in. And so I didn't want any of the people that I interact with or create. I wanted them to have a way out. But when it comes to my filmmaking, I am a very bad person. Hi. I don't have a script. I don't have a narrative. I go out and I see who's available and who's willing to speak. And of course, I have certain things in mind that I'd like to do, but it's more a question of finding out what is being said and capturing that, and then making a short film about it. It was kind of the same with creating these characters. Is I compulsively drew every single piece of vessel, food vessel. And then I was just reading about the time period, and it was in the periphery, because when you read histories, they are about men and their aspirations. And the women are always on the side, and they're secondary, and we're supporting their story and their trajectory and their hopes and dreams. And so I just kept on drawing and making and drawing and making and reading until, I came across the Queen of Sheba and Bilqis, and saw images of her from a long time ago, as you see here, and put her on, a Mogul horse. And she has Coptic symbols represented with her. And that this is the Vigilant Defiance now section. And she is framed with the weapons of mass destruction at the time, but these are weapons that you find in a lot of the Mughal and Persian miniatures of the time that Malik Umber used. Malik Umber Malik Umber's son used these swords and some of the spears. The bow and arrows are from a famous miniature of Emperor Jahangir, literally with a bow and arrow shooting Malik Umber because he never could defeat him. So sometimes the tools of the master can be used against the master. So, and then it's the same with Razia Sultan, reading. And a lot of South Asians know about Razia Sultan. She's a famous figure, but she actually ruled. Her father decreed that his two sons were useless, and on his deathbed said, "I want my daughter to rule." And so here she is on her steed, wearing red, as her father did, to mete out justice, and literally wore the hat that a man would wear, that the Sultan would wear, not the Sultana. She had coinage. So you see coinage in her name that's in Arabic, declaring who she is, the Sultan. So that's how these came about. It's kind of being open to play, but looking at the research and the scholarship that's been done before. And then thanks to Daniel Minter at Indigo Arts, he's like, "Sarah, you can let go of the historical narratives." I was like, "But how?" He's like, "Just do it." So, the beauty of residencies, and again, collaboration and conversation.
Well, that's great. I wanted to ask that actually, because there's so much detail, it's so much historical research. The prints are so animated, as you say. They do look like, these figures do look as if they're going to walk off and enter our world. And one of the things as an art historian I'm always struggling with is this, sort of working between close, deep description, which is also about research and historical accuracy, but then also speculation, and that, using that historical material to tell a story. And so tell me more about the imagination and how you were liberated from that, because I think that's what's so powerful here. And that's why we need artists, right, to show us how to do that.
So I really love this piece that I like them all because I like them all. But so I was, you're reading about the Indian Ocean world. The stories of women are, I really tried to convince Anna and Aisha to title the show "The Ethiopian Maidservant Stabbed Him to Death." I did not think it was a good idea. They're probably right, but I still wanted to call it "The Ethiopian Maidservant to Death" because when I was reading all of these historical documents, I came across one, and the women are rinsed again as background to the aspirations of the men in their histories, right? Mm-hmm. They were herbalists. They were midwives. I read some of those, but then I also read one thing there was one ruler in the Deccan, and he was a masochist, and he was so horrible that in this piece of history that I was reading, they said the Ethiopian maidservant stabbed him to death. So I wanted to just take those little nuggets. And I was also reading, I had met Maza Mengiste, and I might not be pronouncing her name correctly. And again, that's thanks to Deb Willis and the Women in Migration group that we met in Florence. And I was reading her great book called The Shadow King, and which is this, please go get it, please read it. It's a wonderful representation about Ethiopians fighting against fascism in the 1930s. Yes, there it is, Shadow King. And so I started researching. At some point, I was looking for, I had Bilqis, I had the Queen of Sheba, but I wanted someone more contemporary. So there's this is Abibach. She was in the 1930s a freedom fighter against the fascism that was happening. And there are these great black and white photographs of her with a German Luger practicing. And so I took her and I put her on a Persian horse, again, racing off with the green colors that we associate with the African continent of liberation and independence in the 1950s and 60s. And so I wanted to have a contemporary, another kick-ass person, woman, just saying no more. No more.
And I think in doing that, you're encouraging us to imagine or to speculate. And I'm looking at the time, so I want to leave space for questions and also for Aisha. But so there are two women whose work I'm really influenced by in thinking about these tensions. And Lisa Lowe is one of those women, and obviously Christina Sharp. And one of the things Lisa Lowe talks about is how imagining the past differently. It's also about how we can tell stories in the present and then reimagine and rebuild futures. And that's something that I think art allows us to do. It teaches us how to imagine and think, or think to sort of rebuild and recreate new possibilities. But I think also Christina Sharp, and I just want to come back to her. Her work, and that's what she's doing too, in many ways. But she's also struggling with the tensions that come with unearthing these histories that are often violent. And that's something we haven't talked about with this series, that there's resistance and defiance and different forms of violence and defense, but there's also another layer of violence, right, which is just the violence of the harem and the violence of histories of that kind of hover with the beauty. And one of the things Christina Sharp, and I think Saidiya Hartman too, is really thinking about is how do we excavate those, tell those stories, but still without laying those bodies and those women bare in a way, right? Yeah. And I think that's really important too for thinking about how we can work together to rebuild and to rethink, and particularly in this moment. So maybe you could talk a little more about that as well. That's
no, it's so helpful. It kind of goes back again to the reason, one of the reasons, there's never one reason, or the confluence of reasons of making the work is repeatedly over and over again, you'd read these little summaries about the Book of Delights, and it was this progressive sultan who had a harem, and they were 500 Turkic women and 500 Abyssinian women in this city of joy, and they were paid really well, and he was so progressive and forward and all these things. And no one, and then we'd go to the recipes, and it's no different. It's just, but wait, who are these? Who's making the food? Who was there? Who actually has the knowledge? Who did the work? Who did the labor? And even though it was 1469, 500 years ago, it plays out today in contemporary food world. Who's in the kitchen? Who's in the back of the house? Who is delivering our food through Instacart today? Who does that labor? And so it kind of goes, I'm really good at getting on a soapbox, but it's so boring and annoying, right? So I thought I should just make something that we know, as you said, the violence is there. I mean, how we know it's there. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, Sara, there you're going to put weapons of destruction in women's hands. And, you know, you shouldn't do that. And I quickly decided, oh, yes, you should. And I'm not being very articulate right now, but that's kind of where it stands right now in the midst of this pandemic. We were talking earlier about, you know, should I be doing this? Should I be making this? And I think it goes back to, in the midst of this pandemic, as we're being pushed even more and more to be very binary, black and white in our thinking, it's even more important to say, hey, you know, these are nuanced stories. These are nuanced histories. This was an Indian Ocean world that, though still patriarchal and still based on aspects of violence, there were also histories there that were quite beautiful and rich. And enslavement had a different meaning that was not chattel slavery. And why aren't we looking at those models? Why aren't we looking at those histories? So this is one way of excavating it and then allowing other people to do the same. Say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a US citizen and I don't have to do European cabinetry. I can look at these women because they too, you know, I too sing America. Mm-hmm. And this is my way of also singing America because these come from me and there will be more. I'm not stopping.
And I think too that defiance is also the defiance and the solidarity that is created here is also really important in this time, right? Where the inequalities and the stark precarity of so many, which is really built into what is the United States of America, is becoming even more foregrounded. And so, you know, I think together like this, we have to be willing to be defiant together and stand against these things together. And so I think there's another sort of challenge there for us that reminds us why art is not frivolous in this time, but is in fact extremely important. Yeah. All right, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, Sara, for this wonderful conversation. I just wanted to address a couple of comments and questions from the audience. We have a couple comments. Powerful women, warriors. Thank you all so much. And then someone asked us questions like, please describe the exhibition. So exhibition, so we have 10 big prints. The way I can define the way Sara told me, and Sara, you can correct me. The first 6 of them, we call them pleasure, and the rest 4 of them, we say that they are defiance. So hopefully we're planning to extend this show till end of summer. So hopefully we will get a chance in summer so you can see the exhibition in person. The way Anna really curated it and helped us to install, that makes difference. So we have 10 prints, the big prints, which are, and then we have smaller group of prints where Sara is kind of doing portraits of sheroes. They are in different sizes. They are 8.5 by 11. They are 11 by 14, and then they are 16 by 18. Again, they're all edition of 5, but the main exhibition, which is where it's again, there contains 10 prints, and there is an order the way they are placed. So we have a virtual exhibition link on the website where we have tried our best. You can look at the gallery space, but of course, hopefully one day we all will be able to go back and see it. couple of closing comments I wanted to make about housekeeping, or we say technical keeping. So we were not able to go live on Twitch and Facebook, I think because of YouTube. And I wanted to make sure that people who are not on social media, either on Facebook or Instagram, that's why we preferred YouTube. So they are able to go and log in and see, hear you both talking. Next time we'll make sure we'll have Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube integrated. And I would like to say, because I really don't know how Zoom scheduled this meeting. As I told you, this is the first time. I don't know if they want to cut it 7:30 sharp. So I just wanted to make sure that we all understand this show is again up, and we might be coming back with Sarah, because I was talking to Sarah that I really wanted to have a conversation with her collaborators as well. And actually one of your collaborators, I think, logged in and he left some questions, but there's something, again, glitch. I was not able to read them properly. And then Sarah, anything you want to, like, besides this exhibition, what are your future projects? Or actually, I really want to ask, I thought I'll do this, like quarantine. For us, it's been exact 1 month. What are you learning? I know we all learning, but I think I really wanted to know, what do you think you're learning, and how do you think, and again, we know we all are facing the pandemic that's there, but as an artist, as a curator, as an art historian, what do you think you're learning? And there was one thing. So stay tuned. We will be doing these events every week, and we will make sure we make them less complicated and more approachable and feasible. But I really wanted to have closing comments with both of you, and yes, from here. Anna, you can go first.
Oh. Before I do though, Aisha, I also want to say such a huge thanks to you and Atif and 12 Gates for giving me this opportunity too. It's really amazing to work with you and to be involved in this. It's a dream. What I'm learning is how to slow down. I have 2 kids, so we're running a childcare center and a primary school. We're both also working in shifts. So yeah, I think to slow down and patience is, and those are good things to reflect on in a kind of professional position where everything has to be done very quickly and constantly. So I realize I'm privileged to be able to say this, but I am grateful for this time to slow down and think.
I'm sure I have had friends pass away in this time period, and I have lovely parents, and I ended up being in Connecticut with them, so engaging in some caretaking while we're all trying to caretake the thousands of people that are sick globally, and it's surreal. I'm often confused. I can't focus. The only thing that I can do is draw. I can read. I'm reading fiction. I'm cooking a lot because that's just what you have to do, which is fine. But I have a lot of opinions and words, but it's some days it's overwhelming, and then some days I feel like I'm in a cocoon. But it would be nice to just acknowledge and honor, and 2 dear friends passed away of cancer. Others, a mentor and friend, David Driscoll, passed away. We had just seen him a month ago. So kind of continuing and doing it for them, righteously moving forward, kind of living fiercely. For those who have gone, and to just live fiercely, because I'm not backing down. It's just got me more mad. So I don't know what else to do with it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not easy. So again, we have a couple of thank yous. And thank you so much for making it possible. And Sarah, I totally understand, and really sorry about, loss, but and that's the part, you cannot be with them. That's the part during this situation, that you cannot be with people. Somebody was saying that, by the time this ends, I might not be a people person. I said, not me. I am consuming my people through internet, through voice, through phone. I do need my friends and family, and thank you both so much. And thank you so much to our audience, our new, and I'm so, I feel good. I'm learning something new. I'm learning technology. Thank you all, and we will be talking.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.